Welcome back to Faith and Heresy, where doctrine is challenged with historical analysis. Today we're stepping into sacred ground that predates the cross. Before Christ, before Rome, there were the old ways. Earth-based, spirit-led, and deeply human. Paganism isn't a dirty word, it's an ancient framework. Sometimes romanticised, oftentimes misunderstood. From Norse seers to Celtic druids, from the forests of Europe to the temples of the Mediterranean, these traditions revered the land, the cycles, and the spirits. But what happens when they encounter monotheism? What happens when Christ walks into the sacred grove? But how did those ancient faiths evolve or clash with Christianity? Well, today on Faith and Heresy, we're joined by a truly fascinating guest, the creator from the Old Ways over on TikTok. He is a writer, poet, and longtime spiritual wanderer whose journey spans decades and traditions. Once an ordained minister, he spent years immersed in the Christian faith before finding himself called away from the pulpits and back towards something older, something ancestral. Now, in the middle chapters of his life, he has returned to the old ways of his ancestors, embracing a path that is both deeply personal and historically rooted, which is a key here at Faith and Heresy. His insights into religion, myth, and the sacred are as poetic as they are provocative. He also shares his reflections and explorations on TikTok, where he's building a growing community of fellow seekers. The links to that will be in the description and in a pinned comment. Today we'll explore his journey and the meaning of returning to ancestral paths and what it means to seek the divine outside the structures we were given. Welcome, the Old Ways. It's an honour to have you here.
Hello, and many thanks to Faith and Heresy for inviting me to participate in this video and to share my thoughts regarding paganism and the relationship of paganism to Christianity. From my own point of view, I was raised within a Christian home, a Christian family, and to a large degree that influence has never left. My forays into paganism appear to have brought me full circle. I've been a spiritual wanderer, spiritual seeker for many years, around 3 decades, and my wanderings bring me back to the point of realizing that all the stories converge at a certain juncture in history. That juncture is Christ. And there is, like I said earlier, there can be an almost knee-jerk reaction when one mentions Christ and paganism in the same breath. On the one hand, paganism is a signpost towards Christ. And, to my mind, it can be honoured and it can be appreciated and celebrated for being that signpost. But the signpost isn't that thing. And honouring those ways and revering the sign, as the Buddhists speak about the finger pointing at the moon, do not mistake the finger for the moon. The glory of the old ways is, to my mind, the glory of the historic Christ, who has so often and for so long been buried and concealed and hidden behind layers of denominational dogma and ideas that are not so much about Christ, but they are interpretations and views that hide him from view. The wonder of the old stories is the wonder of the tales of the gods. And if we can read the Gospels and the New Testament with the same eyes with which we read the old myths, then we will discover an amazing thing. A charge level towards Christianity is this is purely mythical, it's a mythology. Actually, it's quite an ironic term because the word myth never ever implied, originally, it never implied a fiction. A myth is simply a collection of stories. We can safely say that the story of Jesus is a myth, and we can embrace that term without detracting from its reality. It is the true myth, and if both Christians and pagans can regard it as such, then I believe we can recover the true Christ, the true glorious Christ, as the embodiment, the incarnation, and the realization of the old ways that many honour today. So what is paganism? Fundamentally, it is a worldview, a spiritual path that recognises the sacredness of the natural world. It is, by and large, an animistic spiritual worldview. That is, it is a path that regards creation and everything within it as being endowed with the animating principle of the universe. You can call this principle whatever you like, God, the gods, this energy that permeates all things, the rocks, the trees, the rivers, the seas, the sun, the moon, the stars, and of course by extension and by implication, since human beings are themselves an offshoot and a manifestation also of the natural world, this same energy is also embodied in our own selves. This holding to the sanctity of nature means that within nature is where the pagan finds their connection with their view of what is divine. And therefore the old gods are the faces and the forces of this natural order. You will find therefore gods of the storm, gods of lightning, gods of the earth, goddesses associated with crops and with the underworld, with the sun and with the moon and with darkness and with light, and so on and so forth, so that the pagan deities, whichever ones a pagan chooses to honour on their path, they are the faces of the manifestations of nature. Pagans also esteem the ancestors and endeavour to honour those who came before. There's a sense of connection. There is no idea that one walks these ways in isolation. One walks them as a continuation of the story of those who went before. As I have said, it is the current traveller of these ways who writes their own chapter and adds it to the story of the ancestors. And the ancestors are therefore honoured. Many pagans will have maybe a separate sacred space. If they have some kind of altar or shrine in their homes, they will either incorporate the ancestors into that shrine or maybe have a separate altar and shrine where the ancestors are honoured. And what I do find interesting and fascinating to ponder is, as we peer back through the mists of time, to contemplate from a pagan point of view where the ancestors end, where the first of the ancestors meets that boundary beyond which ancestors and gods cannot be separated. There's a certain idea, a certain sense that those faces that we give to the forces of nature, whom we call the gods, are in fact regarded as original ancestors. Indeed, when we read things such as the Prose Edda, we discover that Odin himself is a very human figure originating somewhere in the Near East, in the realms of Persia, and finds his way to the northern parts of the world. So there is a sense that at some point gods and ancestors merge and are in fact one and the same. And so there is this focus on ancestor veneration and a sense that one is walking in their company on these ways. So what of the relationship of paganism to Christianity? It is pretty much common knowledge that Christianity, in its describing of the events surrounding the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, very much mirrors what we find in the pagan stories. The popular image of Jesus being in the arms of the Virgin Mary is one that we find in the iconography of ancient Egyptian religion, where we find Horus in the arms of his mother Isis. Virgin births were common within pagan myth. Dying and rising gods are themselves very prevalent within pagan mythology. In Norse myth, we encounter Baldur, who is the god of light and beauty, and he comes over as very much Christ-like image. Baldur, who was unfortunately slain through Loki's trickery by a shaft of mistletoe inadvertently let loose by Baldur's blind brother. So we find imagery within Christianity that not only reflects there is an almost identical correlation between a lot of Christian stories, a lot of Christian traditions, and what we find within paganism. One of the most striking for me is the figure of Odin, hanged upon Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights, thrust through with a spear in the quest for wisdom. If you walk into any church, if you walk into specifically a Catholic church, a high church, you will be faced with, no doubt, a crucifix, the image of Christ hung upon a cross. This is where that same image of Odin hanged upon Yggdrasil, to my mind, reaches its complete realization. And what I view Christianity as, it is a mirror within which paganism and pagan belief is reflected. Does this mean that Christianity is simply a contrived compilation that has been pieced together hodgepodge to create this story of Jesus Christ? I think it is far more nuanced than this. Critics of Christianity will claim that Jesus is just one among many of dying and rising gods, one among many virgin-born god-men. But I suggest that what we find in Christianity is the refining of all the pagan myths and types into a pure paganism, if you like. Paganism has sadly become a pejorative. It's been a pejorative for many years. It's a label that ancient pagans would not have recognised. They would not have called themselves pagans. They were simply honouring the gods as they saw them within the natural world, and so on and so forth. But the term pagan became a pejorative. It simply means one who dwells in the countryside. But sadly, there is such a dichotomy between Christianity and paganism, with Christianity really seeking to separate itself from the paganism, and accusations such as what I stated previously about Jesus simply being one among many of dying and rising and virgin-born saviour gods. They've sought to distance themselves from that and do not realise that these old ways are not in direct opposition to Christianity, but are in fact a sign and a pointer to the very faith that they are seeking to defend. On the flip side, there is sometimes a reactionary response, a knee-jerk reaction by pagans towards Christianity. This hasn't been helped, of course, by centuries of persecution of pagans by Christians who, once they got the upper hand, unfortunately sought to quell all kinds of dissent with the sword all too often. But my interest is not so much with what we call Christianity, but with the Christ of Christianity, and he can be lost sight of within all the surrounding dogma. C.S. Lewis and Tolkien spoke of what they called the true myth. This means and refers to Christ as being the historic embodiment of all the preceding pagan types, which pointed to his arrival. And if only Christians could look at paganism in this way, then they would find an absolutely, what I think is an absolutely wonderful dialogue between the same consciousness, the same divine consciousness that gave to the Hebrew people their linear prophetic word, all the way from Eden, where Christ was first promised, to Christ, that same divine consciousness operating within the consciousness of the world outside of those Hebrew scriptures. These old ways, these ancient laws, there's a plethora of stories, a plethora of myths. There are countless tales of the activities of the gods, but strip them bare, bring them to their fundamentals and to their basics. Fundamentally, we find these very basics embodied within Christ. You have gods for various activities, gods associated with various aspects of the seasons within paganism. But look at Jesus, and what do we find in Jesus? We find that he's the one God man who fits all. He's the God of the weather, he calms storms. He is the God of the dead, he defeats death. He is the God of healing. He is the God who can multiply food, who can turn water into wine. So he is sort of stealing some of the glory of Bacchus and Dionysus there. We have all the gods converging within this one historic figure, and that's what I find so exciting and so fascinating. And if Christians could see this, they would find another source of wonder, that the same divine consciousness that is inspiring the book that they hold sacred also being at work in these ancient and colourful and amazing myths of the old gods. And this is a topic I'm currently exploring. I am a writer in my spare time between the regular job and family life, and I am currently working on a book which is, the working title is The Pagan Prophecies, and I want to take these pagan stories and demonstrate how they are realized within Christianity, but more specifically within the figure of Christ. I obviously will update further regarding this. I also have my own channel over on TikTok, Voice of the Old Ways is the name, and you can seek me out there, where I share content, shorter content, a few longer pieces, and that's where I will keep everyone updated about the progress of that book. Thank you for listening, and once again, thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts, however rambling, on this topic that I hold so dear. Many blessings.
The divide between paganism and Christianity isn't as deep as some would have you believe. At its core, both yearn for the sacred, both reach for the divine through story, symbolism and spirit. As always, question everything you've been taught and listen for truths in places you were told to fear. If this video sparked something within you, let us know in the comments. What does paganism mean to you, and where do you see God or the gods in your world? Like, subscribe, and keep walking the sacred road even when it's overgrown. And once again, a massive thank you for joining me and sharing your insights and knowledge on paganism and its reflections that can be seen within Christianity. The Old Ways links are in the description below and will be in a pinned comment as well. Thanks for watching. Take care.